snored a couple of times.
That's a cool bag, Nancy.
Oh, there you go.
I'm a member. I didn't give me a bag.
Well, you gotta fork over cash for it though. It's not a freebie. But it is a good bag, yeah.
It's like the perfect size. You don't drag on the ground or anything.
Yeah, yeah, and, yeah, it's for almost 100 years. Next year will be 100 years for the women's club.
I need to renew my member. I owe you that.
I was always one of the kids in school that wanted the front seats.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna be able to hear better and get better attention.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why the kids wanted to sit in the back.
Like that, you can see better, you can connect up with whoever sits
So
in
Parker, we have some good handouts here in the sign.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's harder to fall asleep in your front.
Yeah, that's true.
I have some good handouts as well.
Uh-oh, he's dangerous, as usual, that's good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's just part of it. I didn't get to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And gentlemen, very well.
All right, well, Councilmember Ferlito said it's time to get started, so when Councilmember Ferlito says it's time to start, that means it's time to start, so.
The good thing is on a timely basis, we respect our staff's time and our
There you go.
residents' time as well.
So let's make sure for all of us up here we have our mics on.
You guys have any handouts?
Sure, if you want to hand out to the whole.
I put a stack up there.
Okay, yeah, if you want to hand them out to everybody, that's great. Thanks, Parker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so welcome everybody to the first public meeting of the Housing Ad Hoc Committee. We're just going to go ahead and launch right in. Marnie, you want to pull up your PowerPoint there? Sebastian, we'll just go right to it, and I'll just do a welcome for everybody. So while Marnie's pulling that up, a couple of housekeeping items. There's materials up here on the front table that you can come and look at. We have a couple of house copies of the housing element. It's a big document, so don't take those ones. But if you want to grab one and rifle through it while you're sitting here, it's available online too afterwards. But feel free to grab it and take a look. And we have some of the documents that the ad hoc committee is going to be talking about tonight. We have the PowerPoint over there, so help yourself. Perfect. So big thank you from staff and myself and on behalf of the city administrator, thank you, who's here, Chip. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the city council for taking a really serious approach to finding creative solutions to this housing need. And that is what you see here represented by our two illustrious ad hoc committee members, Councilmembers Richards and Ferlito. So thank you to City Council, and thank you for the public that showed up tonight. It's a really good turnout. I hope we get over 15 because then I get a coffee, but we'll see. We'll see. I think we're counting online too, right, Chip? Oh, in person only. We'll see. Okay, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. So this committee is all about finding a solution and being creative while honoring and respecting the character of Carmel-by-the-Sea. We have a challenge we need to rise to, but we can do it in a creative way. And that was really the impetus for creating this ad hoc committee that you see in front of you, which is, the ad hoc committee is effectively just two people. It's Councilmember Richards and Councilmember Ferlito. But staff is working with them, members of the public are working with them, so it's meant to be very collaborative. Ultimately, the ad hoc committee of two makes recommendations to the city council, but after lots of great input from everyone, and hopefully everyone comes to every meeting and becomes part of a larger sort of committee that we have here. So we're going to go through a PowerPoint, lots of info to share. Big kudos to Marty and Catherine, who are the team leads on this. So sit back, relax. It is a little bit long presentation. It's dense. There's a lot to go through, but it's important. And the reason it's important is because it's going to try to explain how we got to the number of 349 units that we need to make a plan for. Again, the city doesn't have to build 349 units, but we need to make a plan for them to be built. So we're going to talk about how we got to that number, what the path looks like, and some creative solutions. And then at the end of all that, we're going to hopefully get a lot of great participation from all of you and the folks that are out joining us tonight via Zoom, because that's really what this is all about, is getting a big team approach. So tonight is meant to be pretty informal. We're really just sitting up here so that you all can hear us. It would be nicer if we're all just sitting at the same level, but don't let the dais fool you. This is meant to be a very informal meeting. Plus, we have folks on Zoom, and the only way they can hear us is with a microphone. So when it comes to the public comment, we have a wireless mic. If you feel more comfortable sitting in your chair, we'll bring it to you, or you can come up to the podium. Either way, it's up to you. But it is meant to be more informal. The ad hoc committee members will probably jump in here and there throughout the presentation, and we encourage that. Then we want to hear from you. We want to hear from the public. We're still very early in the process. No decisions are being made, obviously, tonight. We have about a year to go just to update our housing element. And there will be many more public meetings that are focused on specific topics. When we start talking about creative incentives and ways to rise to this challenge, we will have subject-focused meetings, again, to the public, because we do want to get that feedback. So with that,
I just would like to say,
please.
welcome to everybody. I feel really good about this process because we're all in this together and we're all learning every step of the way. In the past, some of the RENA numbers have been way too low, so we're in sort of a catch-up phase. But you're going to learn it's not as scary as it sounds, and it's all about planning, and it could possibly even be a great way to revitalize our community, to have more people actually who live and work in our community. So I think Bobby said it best the other day, solution-oriented, incentive-oriented, and like I said, it's a learning process for all of us. So let's all get in there with good solutions and suggestions. There are no silly suggestions. There are no silly questions. So thank you and welcome.
And I'd like to say thank you all for showing up. I think it's great. It's like everybody, at first I thought, oh, come on, how can they possibly ask us to do this number? And then the more I think about it, the more excited I'm getting about it. And a couple things came to me along this thought process. And one of them was, I think at some point when somebody had a hillside and they wanted to build a farm and they said, you can't do it, how are you going to plant on a hill? And then somebody came up with the idea of a terraced farm or steps, and they were able to do it. So they were able to take a problem and create a very viable solution. And so last night I was thinking about kind of my ethos on this, and I came up with, and I hope we can all embrace this, but it was for everybody to understand the necessity for us to provide some extra housing in this community for some of the workforce that comes in here, and the importance of it, where they're not driving in from Marina or Gonzales or Salinas, and they actually do live here. And this could be everybody from a fireman to a nurse to a teacher to a bartender to a waiter, whatever the case may be. And maybe some of the owners of these buildings can help create this housing, which would then provide some employee housing. So it's understand the necessity. I hope that we can all embrace this challenge. We can come up with some ideas, creative ideas, and then control the solution. Meaning, keep it in character of our village and stay with what we are about with this charming village, where we're not going to build a big box with lots of houses or something like that, or units, but keep it in context with our town. So that's what I'm hoping we can do with this, and I'm really excited. I think it could be a really positive step forward for all parties. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Well said, council member. Well, that's the perfect tee up to the next slide, Marnie. And I'm going to ask one of you of the ad hoc committee if you would read our mission statement that we worked on together, driven by the two council members here. So one of you would like to read this, and then we'll let Marnie and Catherine do their presentation.
I'll go ahead. The mission of the Housing Ad Hoc Committee is to provide guidance as the city updates the housing element of its general plan. This is something that we do every 8 years. It's a necessity, it's a state law to update our general plan. The committee will participate in public outreach and education, consider opportunities and incentives for the development of affordable housing, and explore creative, tailored solutions to meet the city's workforce and range of other housing needs while preserving the character of Carmel-by-the-Sea. So that's what we're all here to join hands and start doing. Now we're going to get a little bit of a wonky presentation. But wonky is good and wonky is the necessity, because we all are, like I said before, we're learning about the process. So Marnie's going to give us some really great information about the why of the process and the how of the process. And that's, the handouts will help you also as we work through this.
Well, thank you. And I just want to say thank you as well for taking time out of your evenings to come join us and talk about our housing element update process. So the presentation is a bit lengthy, but bear with us. We're going to kind of tell you the story of why we have a housing element, and as was mentioned earlier, how we got to the number of 349 for our next housing element cycle. So really all of this begins with our general plan. So the state requires that every city have a general plan, and within that general plan, there are some mandated elements. They're basically chapters, but the state calls them elements. And one of those elements is the housing element. So it is state mandated. Our general plan has all of the 7 required elements, as well as some optional ones like coastal access and recreation. So we have a little bit more in our general plan than just the minimum required. But this is really where the housing element lives. So the housing element really is our blueprint for housing in the community. It's a document that analyzes our current and projected housing needs for all income levels. It contains policies, programs, and objectives on how we're going to achieve those housing goals over a specified period of time, which is currently 8 years. So the state law does require this regular update, and we are required to submit our housing element to the state for official certification. Our current housing element covers the period from 2015 to 2023. It is a certified housing element. So we submitted that and we got it certified by the state. Our obligation was to plan for 31 housing units, and we were successful in doing that. So as many of you probably know, affordable housing really does benefit the entire community. So it allows those that are working in the community to live closer to their jobs. It enables them to have families, have a better quality of life, less commuting, and it also allows people to age in place. So for housing to be considered affordable, the general rule of thumb is that a household is not paying more than 30% of their gross income on housing costs plus utilities. And affordable housing is also part of our Climate Action and Implementation Plan, which you may have heard we recently adopted. So part of working close to where you live means shorter commutes, lower vehicle miles traveled, which is definitely a benefit to our environment. So this really is an opportunity to shape the future of housing in Carmel over the next 8 years. And we really are looking for input from the community. It is essential to this process. So we're asking everyone to attend meetings like you are this evening, subscribe to our email updates, which will be on our homepage, and really just get involved. We really are looking for creative solutions on how to accommodate this need of 349 units. So one way that you can sign up to get email updates is from our website. So right on the home page, there's a sign me up button. So you just click on that button and it takes you to this list of topics. You can click on as many or as few topics as you'd like to get updates on. But the one on regulatory code updates is where we're going to be sending out information regarding this housing element update process. We also have a dedicated web page on our website, and it's under long-range planning. So again, from the home page, you're gonna navigate from departments to community planning and building. And then you will go to the planning division, and then long-range planning initiatives. And this is where you're going to find a dedicated webpage for our housing element update. We'll be uploading tonight's presentation to that webpage, as well as some of the documents that we've made available to you as well. One of those documents is a draft glossary of terms, and so Councilmember Ferlito actually recommended that because we use a lot of acronyms and there's a lot of terminology in the realm of housing, that we create this glossary of terms and also provide you with some definitions. So we do use a lot of acronyms. I will try to keep that to a minimum, but a couple of them that you're going to hear very frequently will be like AMBAG, so that's our local council of government, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. We also say HCD a lot, which is the California Department of Housing and Community Development. And then you're gonna hear RENA a lot as well, and that's our Regional Housing Needs Allocation. So there are hard copies here this evening. Feel free to take one with you, but again, it's also posted on our website. So state housing needs. Since 1969, the state of California has required all local governments to plan to meet the housing needs of everyone in their communities. We currently are on 8-year cycles. And so again, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, they start the process by setting a statewide goal. So they determine what number of homes are needed to meet the projected housing needs throughout the state. And this current 8-year cycle that's coming up, we have a statewide goal of 2.5 million new homes throughout the state of California. They also break down that total into different income categories, and we're going to talk a little bit about those different categories in a little bit. But approximately 1.5 million of those new homes the state is projecting needs to be affordable to very low, or moderate income households. So these are units that are deed restricted at an affordable level for a certain period of time. Usually the minimum is 30 years. The above moderate income category, when you see that, that's basically equivalent to market rate. So that's just a typical market rate unit with no affordability restrictions.
That's the one that's easy to meet.
Yes. So the state starts by identifying the total need, and then they allocate portions of that to different regions throughout California. And these different regions, we call them councils of government. So AMBAG is our council of government. So AMBAG receives an allocation from the state, and then AMBAG is responsible for then reallocating that number to the cities and the counties within our region. And so this is a map of the state of California. You can see the different colors represent different councils of government. For the purposes of our RENA cycle, we are Monterey and Santa Cruz is the council. This is the combined area for this RENA distribution. San Benito County, while it is part of our region and is a partner agency to AMBAG, actually has a separate RENA allocation that they manage on their own. So the total allocation to our region is for Monterey and Santa Cruz counties. So for those of you who don't know, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, or AMBAG, is governed by a 24-member board of directors, and this board of directors is comprised of elected officials from each city and county. So Councilmember Ferlito is actually the city's liaison. She's on the board of directors for AMBAG. So again, AMBAG is responsible for allocating the RENA to the cities and counties, and they do that by developing a methodology. And our region, so Monterey and Santa Cruz County, we've been given 33,274 housing units. So you can see how it starts to kind of trickle down from the state level. AMBAG recently adopted the allocation plan, which is where we got our share of the regional housing needs allocation, which is 349 units. If you're able to read this slide, and the print's a little bit small, you can see how that compares to other cities in our region. So Delray Oaks and Sand City are the only other two cities that have a lower allocation than Carmel. And then you can see Salinas has an allocation of over 6,600 units.
And I might add Capitola, which is only 1.5 miles square, to compare with Carmel, got 1,336 units. So it makes our 349 be a little bit in scale when you look at this. It's like a big pie that's being divided up. Oh, here's the pie.
And there's
Here's
the pie.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is a graphical representation of how that allocation breaks down, again, for within our region. And our magical number is 349 units. So now it is our responsibility to update our housing element, to look at our local zoning, to see how we're going to accommodate our share of that RHNA. And so we have to demonstrate that we have enough sites available over the next 8-year cycle that can accommodate 349 units. And this housing is going to be for all economic segments. So the state doesn't want us just to build 349 new, single-family homes. The requirement is that we build a variety of housing to meet a variety of different needs within our community.
Marty, wouldn't you say they're encouraging us to be creative with the way we think about how to provide housing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why it's so important that we have so much public input, because the more creativity that we can get, the better off we will be.
Absolutely.
Well said.
So within our housing element, not only are we looking at housing sites where we could potentially put new units, but we're also looking at programs to facilitate new housing development. So do we have some existing barriers within our zoning code that are preventing development from occurring? So we're going to be looking at these things. And again, just a reminder that this is a planning document. So the expectation is not that the city is going to build 349 units. We're really trying to set the stage to allow private development to facilitate the construction of those units.
Let's go back one slide, Marty. That's one of the most important points we can make tonight. We have to plan for the opportunity for these to be built. We will not, as a city, be building probably even one unit ourselves, but we have to plan for the accommodation of it. Whether they're built or not is up to those private property owners who may get incentives to build. But the last thing is also really, really important. Water. Now, sometime during this 8-year cycle, we have to make the assumption that we will get water to do it. That may or may not occur. Water will be a limiting factor. But remember, it's an 8-year cycle. We gotta have water tomorrow. Sometime during that 8-year period, we have to hope that somehow we have that water to even make part of this possible. Is that correct, Brandon? Okay, all right. That was a very important point too, because water, I know, is on everyone's mind. How can we possibly do this without water? Just tuck it away in your head. 8 years, hopefully we have some, or maybe we don't. That's beyond our control tonight.
And certainly this plan will set the stage so when that water does become available, the idea would be we have a plan in place and some of those units can actually move forward. So diving into the regional housing needs allocation a little bit further, again, 8-year cycle. We're currently in the 5th cycle, which is that 2015 to 2023 period, where our allocation was 31 housing units. The table that you see on this slide kind of breaks it down by income category. So we have a requirement for 13 market rate units, which are above moderate units. And we did satisfy that requirement, and most of that did come from the construction of new accessory dwelling units. The remaining 22 units that are in the very low, low, and moderate category, we have not been able to satisfy that requirement. So over this last 8-year cycle, we have not seen any of those affordable units come to fruition. So
I will note, though, that as of now, we don't believe that we will be asked to add the 31 to our 349 at this point. So we didn't meet the 31. Now we have a bigger challenge of the 349. But it doesn't appear that we will have the 31 added to that. Remember, it's a planning document.
Yep. So we're entering into the 6th cycle, which again is going to be the 2023 to 2031 timeframe. And you can see here the breakdown of those 349 units. So 118 of those will be market rate units, and that can be met through, again, accessory dwelling units, or if we have vacant lots, new home construction also can fulfill that, that requirement. But the real challenge is the very low, low, and moderate income. And so how do we come up with some creative housing solutions to meet that need in particular? And then just a little bit on these income levels. You might be wondering, well, what is very low income? What is low income? So the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, often called HUD, has published the median income for Monterey County, and it's based on household size. So if we use a family of 3 living in Monterey County, making $81,100 a year, that's considered the median income. So if you make less than that, you're going to fall into either the extremely, very, or low income categories. And the moderate income category is actually 120% of that median income. So using this family of 3 as an example, if they were considered an extremely low income household, they would be making less than $30,700 a year.
Is this for Monterey County?
This is for Monterey County. And then that same, 3-person family, if they were making $97,300 a year, they would be considered moderate income. And so that is still an affordable unit. That's still not a market rate income. So this kind of gives you a picture of what we mean when we talk about a range of housing types and meeting needs for all segments of the community. It includes these different, salary ranges.
One thing you could think about is how many employees in this city, where we have probably 2,000 jobs in our hospitality industry, et cetera, might fit into those ranges. So you can start in your mind to put faces and people on some of these income levels, and it sort of humanizes the things for me to understand that we have people who come here every day and work all day, but they can't live here because they can't afford to live here. So they have to get in their cars and drive far away, back and forth every day. So I think when we start to empathize with the fact that these people are making our village run, it makes us a little bit more motivated to see what we can do to provide some housing that will accommodate them.
Marty, would you mind if I gave like a quick example of something that was going through our maybe we may talk about it later on in this slide presentation, but let's just take a hotel, something like La Playa, where they have a little bit of extra space. Well, what if we talked to their owner and said, hey, we would allow you to build 3 new hotel suites with ocean views if you can change 3 of your existing rooms into very low income housing. And maybe they could put 3 of their employees in this very low income housing. So we would win by getting our numbers up are taking 3 of those units away from what our necessity is. And they would win by developing 3 new suites, which would garner them far more money than the 3 hotel rooms. So it's thinking of things like that. And I've talked to a couple different hotel owners during this process. And at first they said, absolutely no way, no way. But then once we talked about it and they thought about the numbers and they said, oh, I'm getting $200 a night for that room. I can turn that into a low income. With a positive, it would still be a positive cash flow for them, but they could also build another suite that would get them $1,200 a night. So there's thinking like that is what we're trying to do and come up with.
So our existing housing element, the cycle that we're currently in, again, has a number of goals, policies, and objectives to address the housing needs. And some of these, just a high-level overview. There are some goals in there about preserving residential units and how we can go about doing that. Again, identifying sites for the development of new housing units, protecting the stability of our residential neighborhoods by promoting year-round occupancy, and then preserving and increasing the supply of housing for lower and moderate income households. And some of the ways that we do this today are by encouraging, residential units on the second floor within our commercial districts. We also don't allow any existing residential unit that's in the commercial area to be eliminated or demolished unless it is replaced. So we do have some policies in place right now to protect what we have, but we certainly need to kind of look forward and see how we can add to our existing housing stock. Another thing that we are required to do is submit an annual report to the state and tell them about our progress in meeting our goals and our policies in our housing element. And this is called an annual progress report, and we break down the number of housing units that have been applied for, the number that have been permitted, and the number that are under construction. So this is a pretty detailed report and accounting of housing activity within our community. And this table here kind of shows you the progress that we've made over this 5th cycle. So you can see we didn't meet the very low, or moderate, but we did produce 21 new units in that market rate category. And again, the vast majority of those are accessory dwelling units.
Now, the unfortunate thing is there's no requirement that those ADUs be rented. So while we get them and we got to count them on this part, the market rate, there's no guarantee that they would be rented out at this point. If the ADUs want to be counted towards our lower numbers, they have to be deed restricted so that we know they are being rented at an affordable rate, and we would have to develop a mechanism to keep track of that as well. So just some little wonky things to remember.
How many low income units are required out of the 349?
So the question was, for those that couldn't hear it, is how many out of the 349 are required to be low income? So Marnie, you want to answer that for the folks on Zoom?
It's 113 in the very low income category, 74 in the low income, 44 in the moderate income, and then 118 at the market rate.
Okay, thank you, Marnie.
So this is our timeline to update our housing element. So right now, we are working with a consultant on a feasibility study, and we hope to be able to finalize that in the next couple weeks and make it available to the public the early part of December. And what this feasibility study is doing is it's really just looking at a lot of data within our community. What are our demographics? what are the existing conditions, what does the market look like, and then identifying some potential sites that may be ripe for redevelopment. So this is kind of the first step in the process, and it's well underway. Again, we hope to have that to the public very soon. It will be posted on our website. And if you sign up for updates, you'll also get a notification that way when it becomes available. So as we go into winter and spring, we're going to be looking for a consultant to help us with the larger housing element update effort. And part of that is going to include additional community outreach. We'll be looking at our existing programs, kind of assessing what worked, maybe what didn't work, developing new programs for the sixth cycle. We'll also be collaborating with HCD as we go throughout the process, just to make sure that we're on track to be able to get a certified housing element when we're all done. And then going into the summer of next year, we are anticipating having a draft available for review by the Planning Commission as well as the City Council, and then we will submit that to the state for certification.
Ronnie, at what cost is the consultant? What are we looking to spend to have that consultant?
So the question for those on Zoom was, what's the cost for the consultant to do that work that Marnie was just talking about?
So we haven't gotten any cost estimates yet. We will send out a request for proposals, and we will get cost estimates back. I don't know at this time how much it's going to cost, but we do have some grant funding that I'm going to talk about in just a minute that we got from the state that will help fund the effort.
How much is that?
I'm going to get to that in just well, here it is. I'll skip ahead just a little bit. So both state and regional grants have been made available to the city, and we've been successful in securing $160,000 under the SB2 grant. We also got an additional $65,000 under the LEAP program, and then $65,000 under the REAP program. There's also REAP 2 that is underway, so AMBAG is going to be applying to the state for more grant funding, and we certainly will apply for a share of that as well.
Yeah, I think perhaps the Regional Early Action Planning, REAP 2, I think the amount for the whole region is about $10 million, and then that will be divided out into all of those regions, all those cities, states, and counties that got the allocation. So there is money to help us do this, which is good, because we will be very appreciative of that help.
While we're on the subject of grants, it could be pretty costly for us if we don't come through with the program, because aren't we in jeopardy of losing some grant money, Brandon, Marnie? If we don't go through with this program, or if we try to hinder this program in any way, we could be losing grant money. Is that correct? So
if you don't have a certified housing element, you often will not qualify for grants. So one of the reasons we were able to successfully secure this grant funding is because our fifth cycle housing element was certified. If we're not successful during this sixth cycle, we won't be eligible for additional grant funding going forward.
And I believe there's an additional penalty as we lose some of our ability to make our planning decisions, don't we?
So that's, I think, Marnie, actually, you have a slide on potential ramifications. Maybe I'm thinking about it somewhere else, but okay. That's one of the bigger hammers, when a jurisdiction doesn't comply and basically just says, no, we're not going to listen. One potential big hammer is the state can take away a city's authority to issue permits for things. That authority does come down from the state to local jurisdictions as a certified local government.
Thank you. We'll get more on that.
How much does the city rely on these grants? I mean, don't we have a pretty ample budget that comes from other resources? What's the percentage of grants versus the rest of the money we have?
So I think Marnie said we don't have the cost estimates for the bigger work yet, so we can't really answer that question. But we know how much grant funding we have right now.
Right.
So
what's the percentage of the grant funding versus
for this project, or?
Like a percent, or?
Yeah, we can get back to you on that. I mean, I don't have that answer off the top of my head, so if we can take that note today, and if I may get a little more clarification on what you're asking, but.
I guess my point is, like, we're in jeopardy of losing these grants, but are we? I mean, we don't rely heavily on these grants, do we, as a community?
That's quite a bit of money to not take advantage of when you think about it. That amount that we just saw on that slide.
I mean, we could probably get that number, like over the course of the last 3 years, how much we've received in grants from the state.
Well,
Is that what you're asking?
130, 300,000 approximately.
Well, yeah, but there's other grants. There's other grants that we received, not just for this. And we would be in jeopardy of losing all those grants.
So the grants you're seeing on the screen, Parker, are just grants specific for doing the work for the general plan update. Yeah, so those are only specific to this project.
But if we got a grant for repaving Ocean Avenue or something like that, we would lose that too.
So this falls back on all grants then?
Yeah.
Go for it, Marnie.
Okay, so I'm just gonna scoot back a little bit to our timeline. So we're targeting fall 2023 for formal adoption by the Planning Commission and City Council. We will then submit that to the state for certification. And again, we plan to collaborate with them throughout the process. So hopefully that certification step will go very smoothly. And then we will submit our updated housing element to the Coastal Commission for their approval as well. And then we really, we keep working. It really doesn't end there because we have an 8-year program in place that we need to implement. So this is just a little bit of information on that housing feasibility study that we're currently well underway with. So we're working with a consultant. It's called Eco Northwest. And they've been looking at the local context. Again, they've been looking at market conditions. They've been reviewing our zoning ordinance to look at our development standards and our processes. They're also doing a very high-level sites analysis. So they're going to identify sites throughout the community, again, that might be ripe for development. And they're looking at things like underutilized sites. They're looking at, land to building ratio as far as value goes, taking into consideration what the current use of the property is. And this is just to start the conversation. And again, this will help us kind of understand what kind of existing capacity we have. So do we have sites that today can already accommodate 349 units under the zoning that we have in place? Or do we need to look at making some changes to our zoning to reach that number? And again, so we'll send that out. We'll send out a link via email when that's available. We will also post it on our website, and we will be presenting the final document to the City Council as well. Some other components of this larger effort, CEQA, another term we like to use, another acronym. So this is our environmental review that we will do on our housing element update. So that will be part of this process. And then updating the housing element does require us to amend our general plan. And in doing so, that's going to trigger another state requirement that we update our safety element. And this has a lot to do with wildfires and really planning for resiliency in our community. So that will be part of this effort as well. And then again, the Coastal Commission approval and then implementing over the next 8 years. So we talked about the grant funding, that this is what we've already secured, and we will continue to apply for additional funds as they become available to help with this effort.
Marty, on that, the funding, once funding is allocated to Carmel-by-the-Sea, it must be spent specific to housing element or what?
Yes, so the funding that we have received when submitting our grant application, we had to provide Correct. Yeah. So all of this funding is specific for the housing element, to do the environmental review on the housing element, all of those efforts.
It's kind of nice with this one because it is a mandate that they're putting down in a sense, yet they're helping us pay for it, which is untypical lately. They do so many unfunded mandates where they tell us what to do, but they don't give us any money to do it. Where this one, they're serious about it. They want us to do it, and they're helping us with it.
Yeah, and so with that, the contact information for ad hoc committee members, Councilmember Ferlito and Richards. You're welcome to email with any questions, comments. This is the staff contact information for Brandon, myself, and then Catherine. And what we really want to know today is, what questions do you have? What do you want to talk about next time? And we really just want to encourage you to engage and help us come up with these creative solutions to find ways to meet the housing need in our community.
And I can look around here, and I know everybody in here is pretty well traveled, and so maybe you've seen something in your travels that was unique to an area or a town or a city or a village. Let's talk about it. Let's bring them up. And as I said about the terraced farming, it's whatever you've seen in your travels or in your past, or let us know. Maybe we can implement something like that.
Yeah, Marnie, thanks for the wonderful presentation. I wanted to see if the council members want to have any, final comments about the presentation, or maybe just a sentiment for the community, what you'd like to hear from them tonight. We're going to leave up these prompts on the screen for everybody, but council members, if either of you want to have a closing comment on the presentation, or if you just want to go straight to the public interaction, that's wonderful too.
I just want to make a quick comment because you can go to the HCD website as well at the state level, and it is a wealth of information. There are just article after article. There are several sides of this whole issue. Some people think the numbers are too high. There are other people who have done studies that the numbers are too low. It's a little, like I said at the beginning, we're learning. The state, I think, has changed some of their ideas because in the past the numbers were definitely too low and they did not get the housing built that needed to get built. So we are in a deficit. But their objectives of the housing thing is to keep Californians in their homes. Objective 2 is to produce more affordable and climate smart housing. That's a very important part of meeting the greenhouse emissions levels in the state of California, is to get people living closer to where they work, so there's not so much of that commuter traffic and super commuter traffic. We have people who travel, a couple hundred miles sometimes in this state to work. And then objective 3 is to continue to act with urgency to address homelessness and housing needs. If you're one paycheck away from losing a rental property, you can end up on the street. This is something we can avoid if we can provide more affordable housing. Monterey County has thousands of homeless children living on the streets. Their parents were probably at one time one paycheck away from being out on the street. So we want to come at this too through empathy, and we want to keep people in our community who are on the razor's edge. I know of one person who lives in this community who provides so much input into this community. He's a retired teacher. He has, he's rents in Carmel. Rents go up. We could lose this kind of person in our community, and we don't want to do that. So try to put a face on some of these income units, people that might work in your business or work for your hotel or your restaurant or whatever. It's not just numbers on a page. These are impacting people and families every single day. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. And yeah, I'm just really excited about this project. I think that we could really make a difference. And I think that Carmel could lead the charge. I think that Carmel could get recognized. I know that we have a lot of smart brain power in this town. And I think that if we all came to a collaborative discussion and came up with some ideas, I think that we could really lead the charge in this. And I would like nothing more. You know, I used to be in the hotel business, and I would love nothing more than to have my housekeeper and head maintenance person or manager living in town, instead of, you know, if there was a problem, the TV didn't go on or something, either I was fixing it or I had to call somebody that, you know, lived quite a ways away to come fix it. And so I'm really excited about the possibilities of this program. If we just meet it with a positive attitude and a can-do attitude, I think we could really make a difference and lead the charge in California.
Well said, council members. Thank you. So with that, should we open up to the public? So we'll bring them, let us know if you feel more comfortable in your seat. We'll bring a wireless microphone to you. I'll man that, Marnie. Or you can come up to the podium. It's your choice.
I just have a real quick question.
We got to get you on the mic so the people on the Zoom can hear you. So do you want to come up to the podium? Great.
This will be a brief one. I might come back later. I just had a question because I love that idea, honestly. I'll be honest, there's some things I'm very resistant to this. But I like the idea if we could do this in a way that it doesn't affect the people that is least intrusive to the people that have already entered this community. I think it's a great idea. Your idea about just making putting suites on a hotel and having people live in the hotel as long as it was a nice place for them to live. I mean, you have to think about these things, is great. Do you have any idea if all the hotel owners in this whole city were amenable to that? Do you have any idea what kind of numbers you could get into? I mean, I know that's kind of crazy. I'm sure you haven't, but I'm just thinking, 2 per hotel. That's not going to get us to 300.
No, but I don't have the answer. But it's, you know what? It's how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And so I think that if I've talked to John Lloyd over at the Pine Inn. I've talked to Denny for the Cypress Inn and some of his smaller hotels. I talked to Tesher with his hotel, and he had the idea of, he has a lot of space in his parking areas and different things, that he could create some, pretty nice suites. And maybe it is only two low-income units, but it also provides his employees a place to live.
Right.
And
I looked at when we walk here. Often I walk to the post office from where we're renting, and there's 3 hotels on Dolores, I think, and there's a lot of parking in there.
Yeah.
And it takes up pretty much the whole block, essentially, the half block.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there and I looked at it, and if you did it in a nice fashion where you made the parking underground and then rebuilt on that, and I don't know if you make them all into full incomes or you put some hotels, but what I'm saying is depending on if people were amenable to this, but those are privately owned properties.
Right, and
so
but we have to. What our job
there.
is to come up with that number, because it comes down to a developer or a hotel owner. It's like, what's the number going to be? How much is it going to cost him to build 3 hotel rooms, turning 3 old hotel rooms into very low income units? When will he recoup that money? Well, that's where we have to talk with those people to find out what their threshold is. And if we can figure that out and get that formula down, and if the city is amenable to it, and maybe there is some hotels here in town that have 1 story, well, we're going to allow you to build a 2nd story on those things, and maybe they'll get ocean views out of them. Who knows?
Right, and then the other thing, and we're talking about expense, and that's what's one of the other issues, right? Is building down is difficult. I've found this out myself. I did not have any idea what I was getting into. When I see those properties, I noticed that, like, for a small hotel, there's a ton of parking spaces. If somehow you could have those, I don't know if this is plausible, or if you could put those parking spots underneath, you could use a lot more of that space. The condominiums that are on, like, Junipero, you don't see a lot of parking in there, but you see it doesn't look overpacked or anything like that. It looks very nice. I'm wondering if their parking is underground. Or
The ones across from the police station?
Yeah.
They do have a big underground garage. But there was remember, that was on a slope too. It's on a slope side of Junipero. So they were able to dig down a little bit. They didn't have to dig down real deep.
I got you.
But these are what we want to talk about. This is exactly it. So thank you very much for coming up and saying that.
Yeah, and repurposing of buildings. I know Santa Barbara did charrette, and they talked about how do you repurpose a big Macy's or a big Nordstrom's that they lost in their downtown. And they did an incredible job of getting architecture firms to take a building and repurpose it so that it was housing on the upper floors and still retail on the bottom. And you didn't really even notice that the housing was up there because it was interior access to them. But we have to also think not everybody needs a 2 or 3 or 4 bedroom house. There are many people who maybe it's a widow, maybe it's a grandmother who wants to live near her grandchildren, maybe it's a student. Some people would be very happy with an affordable studio. Other people might need a 2 or 3 bedroom if they have a family. So it's kind of thinking in our mind, how do we make room for a changing America? And there are so many now single households, single parent households, and so on. So don't get stuck on everybody needs a 3-bedroom house kind of thing. This is going to be a variety of types of affordable units.
And I think that's where we're going to find our number is the studios. I think that's exactly where we're going to find this 300 number. We're not going to find the 3-bedroom house, but I think we can definitely find a lot of studios, and that's really what is needed around here, because there are so many people in the hospitality industry that need a place to live, that we want to live here in this town.
I figure this is sort of a brainstorming session, and you want input from residents who are major stakeholders in the community. So I just wrote down, I'm sure this is going to be progressing, and we're all going to come up with different solutions, but here, for what it's worth, here's some thoughts I had.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, I'm Tasha Witt. Hello, I know all of you, except for not you.
Thank you.
And I'm a full-time resident, and so is my husband that just spoke. We are renting while we're building, which we are hoping to be full-time residents, also in our own home. I was thinking, for the least intrusive option is that hotel idea, retrofitting into suites. I love that idea, seeing who's amenable to do that, because that's the least amount of change in our character, really. Least amount of change to Carmel-by-the-Sea in general. And again, my husband and I have been walking a lot, noticed between like Brophy's, if you just made a circle from around there, there's a lot of infilling places, it seems. Also, there are already, as you said, homes that are on top of commercial buildings, but some are still 1 story and seems like we could have a 2nd story. It would be nice if we did not go over 3 stories or more, because as we all know, that would we would have less views of our natural space, light, and it would make our town darker to have really tall buildings. And we all want our village character. That's what one of our mission statements that you guys put in the outset there, which we appreciate. When we were talking about the police station, there's townhomes across the street. It seems like you could have townhomes on the other side that would match. That's one possibility. And also, it seems like the Vista Lobos parking lot is underutilized. It seems like there's a potential at Sunset Center. I'm going to put this out there, but I think it's controversial, but there is, the city owns 15 acres around the Flanders mansion, not the mansion itself, but the property around there. Maybe there's a Carmel-esque option that could work, bike trail, I don't know. And I'm going to say this, it sounds like everybody wants to accommodate the 349 units, but it's also 349 parking spaces too, right? And we're a 1 square mile tiny town, and we're fully built out. You can appeal. In the last cycle, the last 8-year cycle of our HNA, Newport Beach appealed because of the Coastal Commission, and they were able to get a number of communities got half the allocation just based on the appeal. So it's worth appealing, because we do have lots of communities that are near here. People can bike here. We do have a bus system. It's not that far away. I did it when I was younger. So that is, possibly an option, since we are a 1 mile square town, to look into, because we are stressed, and we also are accommodating tourists, we're accommodating the parking for tourists. So I just wanted to say that even if it wasn't popular. And then I would encourage as much city-owned property as possible not to subdivide 4,000 square foot lots as much as possible, because that would change the charm and character of our village. And that's what I wanted to say as my first thoughts. But
Thank
maybe
you.
I'll change my mind along the way. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nancy Toomey here. Might be a little bit redundant with some of the things that Tasha said, but I'll go through it. I would love to see a public list created of all of the ideas that have been come up from you guys, from the input, whatever, that we just keep a list. Here's all the ideas and whether or not they've been ruled in or ruled out. And if they've been ruled out, say why. Because sometimes the why something is ruled out can be revisited or refreshed and looked at again. Maybe some circumstances have changed. I don't know. That's, the future will tell us the answers to that type of thing. But as we're looking at positive ways to come up with solutions, let's have a list. And it can be as granular as you want. You can sort it and filter it and all that good stuff, spreadsheet junkies that some of you are. So that would be great that you could put a list like that up on the website and we could see what ideas have already come to bear, so that we're also not being terribly redundant with the work that's happening, so you're more efficient. So I would love that. And then, as Tasha had mentioned, the parking, if we were to achieve instantly overnight 350 new housing units, there will be cars tied to it. And I understand that that the goal is to be able to provide local housing for local people that might be able to walk to work or that type of thing, use mass transit. But people will still have cars to go to Costco, to go to their relatives, et cetera. So to think that they're not going to have cars also is not realistic, in my opinion. And so accommodating parking for these incremental units as they get rolled out, and they got to get rolled out, I get it. And then looking at where there is parking, I think was also mentioned. Any place that there is a parking lot, to take that parking lot and build above it, or put the parking below it, anywhere, whether it's on private property or public property, it kind of doesn't matter. And then as we look at those incremental people and their vehicles, there will be additional demands on our infrastructure and the services that the town provides. That goes way beyond just the planning of these new units. That's just demand on the city hall, demand on a lot of aspects of all of the services that the city provides and the businesses provide and the service providers that come in from outside provide, et cetera. So it just raises the level that we're not necessarily used to, at least recently. I realize that if you rewind the clock, 30 years, that we did have 4,000 or more full-time residents in this town. So it's not like that's impossible, but the world is different now. The frequency of cars is increased, et cetera. So it can be some interesting balances and challenges as we add people to our community, which is going to be a great thing. I mean, I love people, I love interacting with people, I love diversity that comes from more people too. So that's all good things. But as we know that this has a goal of addressing lower income needs, again, all welcome, a part of the incremental of the community. I just question that our businesses don't necessarily serve low income. And so I don't know what that will do to the business mix, the demands on them, how the lower income folks, whether it's, I don't know, groceries. Maybe it's not a big thing, but I just kind of want to throw that out there as an aspect that might cause us to think about other aspects of this program at a macro level over time. It's not going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years, clearly, but as we rewind the clock or wind the clock forward a bunch, there may be impacts on the local businesses. And then also wanted to call out the work that's happening underway with the Design Traditions effort. We need to think about what adding all of this incremental housing is going to do the design traditions, and understand, how can we be more flexible, yet still take care of the character that we all came here to live and love and enjoy and be, passionate about with all of our energy. So I'm concerned about the design traditions implications as that goes forward. I know that's got its own deadlines, and a lot of these are in parallel, but we need to be mutually aware as much as we can be. And then as my one last kind of random thought, with the redirection that has happened most recently with the Carmel mission and the closing of this school, I was just thinking, again, it's radical and might need to be on the list, but immediately marked off. Larson Field, to repurpose Larson Field with a housing complex. I think that has a potential. It's just an idea for the mix. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Richard Kreitman. I sent this to the ad hoc committee today. I just want to read it. Without water, we can't do this, so we have to just leave it out of the discussion. The potential sources of new units. So we have existing vacant lots of record. Some of them already have water, or they'll have it in the future. How many empty lots in Carmel-by-the-Sea? A couple of dozen? I'm not even sure. Maybe Brandon knows. What?
It's less than that.
It's less than 20?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
But if they build a single-family home with an ADU, they'll be, we'll get a few more units on that. So that may be, 20. ADUs and junior ADUs, that effort is underway. It makes economic sense for many of us and could account for scores of new units in the next 8 years. Including, as I said, combining ADUs with new single-family construction. So someone, as people are doing now, buying a residence here, tearing it down, rebuilding, many will be rebuilt with an ADU that will that will add spaces. I do have we adopted an ADU ordinance? Are we planning to adopt an ADU ordinance? Have we?
So the city currently has ADU regulations. We are in the process of updating those regulations right now. Yeah.
So then there's SB 9, which is this new state law which permits single-family homeowners to convert their property to a duplex or split a lot and put two houses. Or you can split a lot and put two duplexes on each of the new lots for 4 total. I don't think this makes economic sense for current or potential property owners in Carmel-by-the-Sea because they can't rent them out short term. It may happen. We may see a few lots split into double units, but as I say, I don't think it pencils out for us. So we spoke about additional units in the commercial district. There's just finished, in the last year, the apartment above Cantonetta Luca, the former John DeLue space on Dolores. They're building a few units behind that. We can convert some of the limited existing second-floor office space to apartments. I know one in the Harry Parashas's building is probably going to be converted into 1 or 2 units. And this could provide at best a couple of dozen units, excuse me. And of course, the pit is planned to have 12 units, so that'll be part of the, I don't think any of those will be low income. So the big option, and many good options have been discussed tonight, is building a multifamily housing above an underground parking garage in the North Sunset Center lot. And this has been discussed for years and is a very viable, but it's an expensive option. Just the rule of thumb, I did a little research, it's, and this may be low, but in California, it costs roughly $80,000 per underground parking space. That's and I think that still applies. The north lot is approximately 40,000 square feet. That's about an acre. And depending on how you design the apartments and configurations, you might provide between 25 and 40 units per floor. So if you had 2 floors above it, you might get between 50 and 80 units. And apartment sizes, so again, in the United States, 450 square feet is considered a studio apartment. My ex-wife and I lived in a 400 square foot cottage, 1 bedroom. It was perfectly comfortable. A lot of us have lived in small. So Apartment sizes 450, 500 square feet for a one-bedroom or a studio, 750 square feet. You can get in a two-bedroom apartment. And three-bedroom apartments, 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. So you can get a lot of apartments on 1 acre, depending on how much open space you have, corridors, stairways, et cetera. But the Sunset Center North lot isn't the only piece of real estate, and people have talked about this. The South lot is about the same size, about 1 acre. Be a great location for parking and housing. It does have the 2 existing historic buildings you'd have to work around. The Vista Lobos property, owned by the city, I walked that off. It's about 60,000 square feet. And it's on a slope. You could easily get parking underneath. So these are all potentials for a lot of units. And then under private property, there's an old AT&T building at the southwest corner of Junipero and 7th. I don't know how many people are even aware it's there. And it has an 18,000 square foot footprint. And it was a switching center. And from what I understand, all the switches that filled that building originally now fit in a closet. It's electronic. From what I understand, it's empty. And that's a nice location there. 2 of our churches, the Church of Scientology, not the Church, not Scientology, what am I saying?
Not that.
The Christian Science, yes. Christian Science on Lincoln and Lincoln. Carmel Present, Junipero Ocean. They each have a parking lot of about 10 to 12,000 square feet. And 1 floor of underground parking and living units above, that could provide substantial financial benefits for the churches. I mean, and units. So taken together, these parking housing possibilities would more than cover our assigned units. The problem is they're very expensive, and it may be that the only way you really can underwrite the cost of this is through revenues from a paid parking program, which is an entirely separate discussion, but actually the 2 things now come together because paid parking could pay for would underwrite parking garages and even possibly subsidize the housing. Based on tonight's presentation and that $81,000 median income, so I just figured out, so a low-income unit would have to rent for $1,200 a month, and a very low-income unit would have to rent for $1,000 a month based on the county median. So that just gives you the numbers for what a subsidized low-income, very low-income unit. And I'm sorry, I couldn't figure it out for the median, but that medium thing. I'm not sure what the formula is. Anyway, so thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for the math, too. That helps.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, my name is Ben Beasley. I don't have all the math. It seems obvious that zoning is going to have to change in some locations. It looks like we don't have a problem getting market rate housing. And if we provide the opportunity for market rate housing, it's going to come in. The problem, based on Series 5 or whatever you call it, is the affordable housing. So we're going to have to, is to assess or basically tell, you want this house, you want to build there, you're going to have to provide more money for our affordable housing quotient, which helps because the problem is developers aren't going to come in and say, for $1,000 for, it won't pencil. So how do we get there? We got to help them. We got to subsidize it. The only way to do it is to take the people that are paying market rate and say, I'm sorry, if you want to live here, this is the new pay to play is to do this. And then put that into our affordable housing quotient and then help build something that makes sense. Because the economy is based on this last time. Market rate's not the issue. It's the affordable housing, and that doesn't pencil out. That's all I got.
Good points.
Parker Logan, hi.
Hi.
In the current cycle, it's almost to an end. There was the 22 units that weren't built on the low and very low income. With this new allocation, with over 150 in that category, 0 were built before. How many do we plan on building now?
That's the challenge. That's the challenge, Parker, and that's what we're trying to do is come up with something that will make it some sort of an incentive or make it enticing for a developer to do this for us.
Right. Which would be difficult when we talk about the medium household income. This is Monterey County. What's the medium household income of Carmel-by-the-Sea? Well, sure, it's much higher.
Those numbers could go up a little bit, but I don't see it being drastic.
But here's a pretty cool headline in the news. California State Auditor releases scathing report on RENA process. Report finds housing goals are not supported by evidence. And then here's just a few more. The HCD violated Government Code 65584.01B1. HCD failed to consider several of the factors listed in Government Code 65584.01B1. HCD's use of 5% total vacancy rate is wholly unsupported by any data and completely unreasonable. HCD failed to consider appropriate comparable regions, and the HCD's failure to reassess the RENA determinations and make corrections will impact the current and potentially all future housing cycles. What I'm getting at is, these numbers that they've come up with are faulty. They don't support evidence. I mean, how do we go from 31 last cycle to 349? And we couldn't even do half of them the first cycle, and now we're all getting excited about to whose benefit? I mean, if the hotel gives 3 super low-income units, but then they have 3 luxury suites, sounds like that hotel owner strongly benefits. Of course, they'll be incentivized to do that.
But with that, Parker, doesn't the city benefits as well, right? Because the city is going to have an employee that lives in town that would take that person off of the freeway, and also the TOTs that a $1,200 room is going to garner over a $200 room.
Right.
So,
but we're only going to accommodate like single employees. What if he has a family? I mean, this is a small little room.
That's what I'm saying. I personally don't think that we're going to get to those numbers with 3-bedroom units. I think we're going to get to.
We all agree we're never going to get to those numbers. I mean, we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the water. We don't have the space. So basically, what I'm saying is maybe some of these grant dollars, or maybe some of the dollars that are brought in from various ways, can be used to appeal this, as Tasha suggested, and there's other communities that are doing it, and I've got information that I've emailed to all of you, which outlines an ongoing situation that we could be part of a class action, and it would at a low cost, because enough cities that are joining it, it'd be less than $50,000, maybe less than $25,000, in order to maybe adjust these RENA numbers to make them more, they could be appeasable. They're just now it's impossible to do this.
I know that is a challenge, but can I ask you, and maybe the rest of the audience, Tasha and Nancy, do you guys feel that we should not try to supply workforce housing?
Not at those high level numbers.
But at any level?
Talk about like the big commute from Marina. That's 12 miles away. People that make $500,000 a year commute to San Francisco. Commuting is part of what you do and the part of the way of life of California.
I know, but that's not the question. I'm just questioning, do you feel that city of Carmel-by-the-Sea should try to provide any sort of workforce housing?
No, I do not.
Okay, well.
And I think there's probably a lot of people who agree with me.
And that's what I want to hear that too. I want to hear that too.
It's a very, very small, unique, very obviously very affluent community that attracts affluent visitors. These kind of low income housing things, what do you think some of these people go do on the weekends? I mean, are they going to be able to afford to go to dinner here and enjoy the community? They're just, unfortunately, Carmel-by-the-Sea isn't designed to have a place for that.
Well, I'm not trying to argue with you at all. I'm just trying to discuss this, and I think it's good for other people.
I mean, the last RENA cycle, but none of those units were built, not a single one.
But do you see the potential problem if you're looking, say, 20 years down the road, that we continue to marginalize, where their people can't work? The commute is just too great.
Marina is 12 miles away. It's not that great.
But maybe that's good. Marina houses that are $1 million now. So now where is that group going to go? I mean, how far can we push? I'm trying to think. I want to be proactive and think, what's best for our community? What is the best thing that we could possibly do for Carmel? And I think that workforce housing is a positive component for Carmel.
I would be careful about that and look into other communities that brought that in and how it started to deteriorate those communities.
Well, that's what we're trying to.
That's happened with other very affluent places.
But that's what we're trying to
bring in the low income, and then it's not the same.
But that's what we're trying to do, is protect that. We want to, like I said in that initial statement, we want to control the solution. And the best way we can control the solution is by being proactive and think right now how we can do that. How can we protect our culture, our character, our charm, and also get this done?
Well, we did it in the last RENA cycle by not building a single low-income unit.
Parker, but in the last RENA cycle, maybe we didn't offer the right incentives. Maybe we didn't have the right attention on this program. We have the attention on it now, and we also realize that we may have to offer quite a few incentives, and some things may have to be restricted. If you live in a small, affordable studio apartment, maybe it's deed restricted that you don't have a car.
What makes you say we have that attention on it now? Because you're on that board?
No, because right now, this is our task for the next year, because our 5th cycle is up, and we are required by law to go into the 6th cycle planning process.
But what about the cycle we just came through? Were we not required by law then, and we are now? Has something changed?
No.
We had a plan. We presented a plan 5 years ago, was it? We presented the plan, and that plan was accepted. And so we can't help it that no developers came in and did it.
Right.
That's not our
what
fault.
it sounds like to me is going to happen again. And you're going to incentivize, and it's going to be to a great benefit to the hotelier, because you're going to really have to have the low income, but he'll say he's going to, and now he's got 3 penthouse suites on an extra level with ocean views. I mean, it sounds like the very rich are going to get richer, and these are not going to get built again.
That was merely a suggestion that has not been put into practice at all. That's why we're here, is
it's really
to
the only
talk.
way we can do it is by going up. We can't go out. We don't really have the land.
Infill and up, we've got a lot of one-story buildings in town that could be 2. Walk around and start to look from a different eye as you walk around.
I think it would ease everyone's tension if we looked into what I presented to the council and the city staff, and looking into having those RENA numbers lowered to something that's something feasible that we could actually accommodate.
There was a lawsuit about this, and that lawsuit failed. I believe it's in an appeal period now on that lawsuit.
Well, that you're speaking about San Diego?
Yes, the one that was decided earlier this summer. And
right. Well, but that's a different community and a different lawsuit.
There are many communities
with different terms. I mean,
there are many communities.
The state auditor or the state controller who did an audit on RENA and HCD has found lots and lots of holes and missing gaps, and the numbers are not accurate.
And there's a whole other side of the coin that thinks the numbers are too low. So we are in this process. We are required to go through and at least find the spaces for this to take place. We cannot force any property owners to do this. We can incentivize, but we cannot force. We don't have to build 1 unit as a city. We have to provide the opportunity for it.
Well, what if the community doesn't want to do that? Then the city has to do it. So
no.
Not do, but you have to provide something, right?
No, we have to provide
the community,
the
property owners to
we
come
have
up
to
with the plan?
provide a planning document that allows for these units to be built at some point by someone. We cannot force them to do it. Some people may want to, some people may not.
Well, let's say none of them want to.
Then
what are you going to present?
Then they won't get built. But we're going to present to the state a change in our guidelines. Let's say, am I correct, Brandon? We're going to present to the state a change in our guidelines that would allow some sort of tweaks to the property owners, that would allow it, that would encourage them to do it. If they don't do it, that's not on us. We did what we were supposed to do. We provided some creative avenues
Right.
for extra housing.
I just think we should be careful about how we incentivize those creative avenues, because it sounds to me with some of the different ideas I've heard, not just yours, would really incentivize very wealthy people to make their very expensive properties even be more valuable without getting to the core problem, which is workforce housing.
Well, and if I might, counsel, it sounds like what your comment is we need to be careful with the incentives and just be aware that if we are going to incentivize, that we're thinking about what those incentives are and how far they go.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking for tonight, is that kind of feedback. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any other.
No,
We want to be
I'm
respectful to
gonna
other
give up
people's
the
time.
floor.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
thanks for letting me summarize your comment there.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Hi, I'm David O'Neill, and it's okay. I just wanted to say I really like the idea of coming at it from a compassionate and a creative perspective. I really resonated with that because it seemed really scary when we first looked at the idea of trying to squeeze more into this beautiful place that's as unique as like Monaco or other places like that. People come from all around the world to see this unique and beautiful place. So, we're all working very hard on that and the design guidelines and things like that. So the only question I have is, what sort of things are going to be priorities that are going to be trumped, by this? What sort of things that we care about deeply are going to say, this is more important that we squeeze more people in? And I guess that's what we're going to work on together, but I don't know if you have any comments.
Well, the plan is, we have to do the plan. It's a requirement by the state. So it's not like we can say, oh, we're not going to do that. We have to do the planning process. And you saw we have grant money to do part of that planning process. And this is how it starts. We start with questions, we start with suggestions, we start with where we are. I made the allusion to the sausage being made. Sometimes it's not pretty, but sometimes there's a lot to mixing up till you come out to a product that will be satisfactory and meet and be a certified plan. Once we have a certified plan, we have done our job. If HCD says, yes, you created the opportunity, we have done our job. Is that correct, Brandon?
That's right. And I think maybe if I could add a little bit to that,
Yes.
To sort of round out the answer. If part of the question is, what are we potentially going to give up, I think is what I heard. Like what is it that, the City of Carmel residents hold dear that we might have to give up in order to meet that number? That's, like you pointed out, that's exactly why we're having this meeting. We want to hear, the ad hoc committee wants to hear from the community, what do you care about the most? Like what should we totally avoid giving up if there's something that you as a community? So if you have that feedback, let us know, because obviously you've heard from the ad hoc committee members, things are going to have to give, but some guidance from the community of what should we stay away from, what should we look at giving, that's helpful to know from the community. So your question's a good one, and that's actually the question we're asking you. So, so thank you.
Because, I can initially say parking is a real worry for me. Where, if we develop these new units, where is parking going to be? Now, across the street, there's a little hotel where 3 of the rooms were taken out and 2 condos were built. But the way those condos got built was because the owner had another building nearby that he designated parking spots for those 2 condos. So these things have been done, but we have to continue to think about it and how we can do it. But now they're not deed restricted. They weren't ever deed restricted, but had it been a different time and place, the city could have put a deed restriction on those 2 units and said, hey, you're going to have to rent these things out for, low income or whatever it may be. And then he would have at that point had to determine, is it going to be worth it for me to do that? And so but parking is one of those things that I think is going to be a problem for us.
And I gave the handheld to Victoria. Go for it, Victoria.
It's blinking.
There you go.
I hear myself. Well, I thought I'd take this opportunity to do a public service announcement about the steering committee. Many of the folks in the room now already attend, which is great. But I wanted to point out that tomorrow morning, if you haven't had enough tonight, at 8:30 in the morning, I'm going to go home and do some studying, and we're going to have a meeting in the morning about how design sort of interpenetrates with all the questions we're asking tonight. And for example, I'm an architect, as some people know. I also did my graduate school thesis on housing. I also was in charge of all the housing for low-income housing in the Bronx when I graduated from college. So I care about housing quite a bit, and I'm very interested in the problem. And I just want to say I'm so impressed and grateful for the creative kind of mentality that I'm seeing from the staff and the ad hoc committee already. I agree that it is a very exciting prospect. I think it is daunting at first, but then when you study it more and more, you realize it actually is exciting. And I would even venture to say, as an architect, that if we take care of the thing that the steering committee is most committed to, which is the character of the village, we are absolutely committed to retaining the character of the village. And if we do that well, we will actually be able to create, in my opinion, a framework, a planning document that will more than take care of the 349, possibly even to the extent that the next 8-year cycle, we don't have to think about it very much. That's my professional opinion of what the power of design can do without a iota of sacrifice of the character of this community. And it's a hope, it's a belief, but we need to work toward it together, obviously. And I just want to encourage everyone to come tomorrow morning. I know that's early. If you can't come, you can Zoom in. If you can't Zoom in, you can watch it in retrospect and submit comments afterwards or questions. So anyway, very much looking forward to this process. I'm very excited to be here, so thank you.
Well, we only have to look to our Carmel Foundation housing, which is right downtown, as a wonderful example of how housing can fit in. And most of the people that live in the Carmel Foundation housing walk around in town and find a grocery store, and they find a drugstore, and they find things to do right downtown. There's a certain vitality in living downtown too. Many people find it very desirable to live downtown because they enjoy the streetscape. They enjoy being able to walk down to the restaurant, walk down and have a cup of coffee. So I do think that this can be an exciting process, a challenging process certainly, but it can be exciting. And I think Bobby was right. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And this is the first big bite tonight. And we're delighted that you all turned out. And, Ashley, would you like to talk?
Just real quick.
Okay, please do.
So, all I want to say is that I'm excited about this opportunity. This is an opportunity for our town to be socially and economically at scale to a real, living, thriving community. We have so many people that work here that cannot live here, and it's not just about the commuting, it's about the culture of the town.
You're right.
Many of our artists cannot afford to live here, but they're paying all their money for a rent for a gallery space, for example. And I'm connected obviously in the artist community, but I know many of them cannot afford to live here as well. A lot of our teachers, a lot of people that are invested in this community as much, if not more, than many of the residents would have the opportunity to live and work here. And that, to me, is an opportunity to strengthen our town and our community. And so I'm excited about this opportunity. I think we can be creative about it. We have a lot of unoccupied space that can be used, like in our residential, 60% that's not taking away property rights, but looking at all these options from the hotels to the homes to business communities. Well, in my building where I lease my gallery space upstairs, a lot of that space is hard to lease out for office space now. they're already looking at converting those into units. So I think this is an opportunity to enrich our community. And so I thank you for being creative and open and actually just heading this on.
Thank you very much. You did remind us, Brendan, that there are people
Yep,
in
and
Zoom
I
land.
see a hand up on Zoom. Let me go to Zoom really quick. Yeah, if you can, certainly, yeah. So we're not limited to one comment for sure. But let me go to. I see Dale has his hand raised on Zoom. Dale, you want to unmute yourself and share with the group?
Okay, it's letting me do it now. So I have a few questions, and I'll just get off then, and you can either answer them now or later. What was the reason for the state to force ADUs on us? What were they trying to accomplish?
I can answer that really quickly, just so you know. So one of the guiding principles or reasons that the state created those series of ADU laws over like 2016, 17, and 18 was to inject smaller units by design that may be more affordable into communities. If you read the legislation, when they set up ADUs, they're not allowed to be rented as short-term rentals, and that was intentional so that they can be full-time rentals for people. Whether they get used as a long-term rental, you can't require that, but that was the reason, was to increase the rental stock.
And Dale, I might comment on that too. In many other communities, ADUs are housing additional family members. It's been quite common in other countries. The mother and father have a big house. Son decides to get married, they add on a little unit in the back, and he gets married, then they get pregnant and decide they need the bigger house. The family moves, the mom and dad move into the small unit, and the family prospers and expands into the larger unit, and then along comes another little add-on. It's happened for years in other countries and on the East Coast as well. It hasn't happened as much here, but in other communities, allowing people to create ADUs or convert garages and so on has been a godsend to people to have a decent space to live.
Seems to me you could do that by just adding on a room rather than calling it an ADU. But how many additional rental units and affordable rental units at that have we created in Carmel-by-the-Sea? And I understood at one point there were 70 more applications. How many of those do you think are going to result in low income, moderate income rental units, or any kind of rental units? I'd guess almost none, but you can answer that later. Is there any way for us to force ADUs to become any kind of rental, whether it's market rate or otherwise?
No, we don't have any authority to do that. People can choose to deed restrict them and income verify if they want, and then they would count towards our lower income RENA numbers, but no, we can't force someone to do that.
And realistically, nobody's gonna deed restrict their own property if they don't have to.
I understand. So basically, what ADUs have done have subverted our zoning code almost completely by allowing people to build large houses on small lots, but I think we all know that already. So the whole thing was a joke to begin with. How many housing units has this created, this whole process in California? How many housing units has it created? And if you don't know the entire number, you probably know because some of you are attending meetings. How many has it created in the sphere of influence that we're involved with? Any?
I don't know. Sorry, Dale. I don't know if we have that number off the top of our head, but are you asking what the RENA process?
We're all spending a lot of time doing this. We're going to spend money on consultants when we could be doing other things. How many units has this process created over however many years this has been going on in Marina, in cities that are around us, or in Carmel-by-the-Sea? Any?
Are you talking about the RENA process, Dale?
Yes.
I'm assuming Karen can maybe get that from AMBAG because they might have that number.
Yeah, I can probably get that number, but Dale, we're required to do this RENA process. This is not something the city said, oh, that sounds like a good thing to do. We are required by law.
I know we're running out of time. I'm a practical person, and it seems to me that we're wasting our time because probably nothing's going to come of this. We're spending time doing a plan that we probably, if we all voted today, would say in 8 years will produce no units. And certainly no affordable units based on what I'm hearing. I've built 5 houses here. I know the economics. So it seems to me that the suggestion, and it was in the paper today, of joining some kind of a situation where we can stop this nonsense from continuing might make some sense. I'm not saying we should do it, not recommending it, but it seems to me this is an academic exercise, and it's interesting, and I really like the fact that we can talk as long as we want tonight. That's sort of, it's been a really interesting.
Sorry, Dale, you're breaking up. We're losing your connection.
Yeah, okay, so I'd like to know from the ad hoc committee, what's your opinion of the odds that 350 units will be built in the next 8 years, or the next 16 years, or the next 24 years?
We have no way to opine on that at this point. And the point is, though, we are required to do this. Even if we joined a lawsuit, we would not stop this planning process because we are required to complete this by the end of next year. That would only put us woefully behind. And let's just say this lawsuit that might be out there failed anyway, and then you would be behind and still required. So there's no track other than to complete this process.
So I would suggest that we put a plan together as quickly as we can and submit it so that we can move on to something that's going to produce some results for the city. That's all. I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much. This was great. And I appreciate everything you're doing, Karen and Bobby and Brandon and the staff. You guys have done a great job.
Thanks, Dale.
All right, anybody else in the room want to come up? Come on up. Come on up.
Just something I read, and it should be noted. I think the city can have up to a fine of like $600,000 a month if we don't do this plan, right, Karen? There's a fine if the city does not come up with a plan by then, by 2023. I've read this, that the state can fine us. So yes, we do have to come up with a plan, whether it's an appealed plan or a plan, but you guys have to come up with a plan, and that's what Karen keeps repeating. There's no way we can't get out of coming up with a plan, or we will be severely fined. That's my understanding.
I don't know about the fining, but I do know that we could lose our ability to approve our own permits, and that might be worse than a fine.
True. In
the long run, because at some point, let's just say someone decided they wanted to build a 6-story building, and it was full of affordable units, and we said no because that's just too tall or something. And it's my understanding that the biggest hammer is that could be given ministerial approval if we fail to do our adequate planning. So we do not want to chance anything like that. We want to get with the program, do the planning that's required. Hopefully, we will create some movement and some things will be done. More and more, I'm hearing that restaurants are having a hard time getting employees, and hotels are having a hard time getting employees. Well, maybe this will be part of the answer to some of that.
And it does come with money, so hopefully maybe there's some second-story apartments above city-owned buildings, or maybe some of the hotel owners will take the incentive. But anyways, just wanted to mention that part.
Or like we had said, the mixed use above a commercial building, the second story. I mean, that's just that's a great idea. I don't want to come at this combating it. I want to come out with embracing it and saying, look, we're going to control our destiny. We're not going to let the state control it. We're going to control it.
And watch out how much zoning laws that we change, because that will affect us forever.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, in the last RENA cycle, I believe there were very, very few cities that had to change any of their zoning laws. And most of the time, if you look very, very hard, you can find the space for this to happen. There are all kinds of things that were identified in the 5th cycle. Now, we can't force someone to take advantage of those opportunities, but rezoning to allow a second story on a building is not the end of the world either. So we have to not imagine that rezoning we have control of how we rezone. So that is a good thing. No one is saying you must rezone to this amount. This is up to us, but if we can do it, or if we need to do it to create this plan that would be accepted by HCD, that's still within our control of how we do it.
My name's Dylan Witt. I'm going to be really quick. You asked about what we want to preserve. To me, the thing that I worry about, I want to keep what everyone said, the village feel of the town. I think you can do a lot of things downtown and make it still look okay, and not make it, a 4-story building that would be horrific. And I want to keep people's rights. I don't want to force someone. I'd like to incentivize people if you're going to do anything. I don't think you should punish people or force people to do things. And I do want to try to keep the residential area the way it is. I don't think we should try to rezone that, make multiplexes, duplexes, because the reality is, we all know, these lots are 4,000 square foot lots. We already are on small lots. Now, we have put bigger houses than we should sometimes and things like that, but in general, most people already have a small, and that's part of this charm of the community. If you try to force the people into the residential community, you're going to ruin the feel of this whole community. And it sounds like you already know that.
Yeah,
but that's, if you said that, what's important to me, not to force people to do things, to incentivize, to make it blend into the downtown, to make creative things so that it doesn't affect the city in a negative impact. And I think if we're creative, we can do that. Whereas if we just force things, it's going to be.
Well, I don't think that we can force things. That's just it's just a moot point. We can't force anybody to do anything. What we're trying to do is create people to want to do things. And you said it, just the first thing you said was you could think of lots of different ways to enhance housing in their downtown district. Please tell us.
Well, you've already come up with some of them, but if I come up with anything else, as I said, some of the ones we've talked about today, I think were great ideas.
Well, and I suggest as you walk around town, all of you, I've really started looking up and noticing we have some buildings that could use an update and go another story very nicely. We have several around town, so just start to notice that and start to acquaint yourself with that. SB 9, I think, is the one that allows lot splits. That has had so little usage in the state. Nobody really wants to do it in most places. And we have a lot of guardrails on those things as well, which Brandon has explained in the past, but he can maybe put some information about those guardrails out to the public. You can't split it, and there's just a lot of things that are required if you do anything like that. And in most cases, from what I've read throughout the state, very few people are taking advantage of that one. Someone did bring up appeal. The appeal period in our AMBAG area passed. 2 cities appealed. Sand City appealed their numbers, and Greenfield appealed. Greenfield appealed on the point that they did so well in the 5th cycle that they shouldn't be, quote, punished in the 6th cycle. Well, they are still a city that is terribly, terribly overcrowded and has a real need for housing, so their appeal was turned down. Sand City appealed on the basis that they have so much of their city is in a protected property along the ocean there, and that they have very little room for the units that they were assigned. And it was pointed out that all those big shopping centers, the big box shopping centers, could at some point be rezoned so that they were also able to accommodate housing throughout those shopping centers. There's a lot of parking, a lot of asphalt out there, and those could all have housing above them. Whether that will happen, that's up to the developer or the person who owns those properties, but the city could choose to meet their numbers by rezoning those properties so that was a possibility. Someone in the past mentioned, and not that we want to make Carmel into Santana Row, but that was an aging shopping center that was failing, and they created those multi-story buildings with beautiful restaurants and shops down below and pretty high-end housing up above, and created really a whole different feel. The governor just okayed failing strip malls to be rezoned for housing, which is going to be a really, really big advantage in the state. If you know, you've all driven in some of these small towns where you see just an empty strip mall. Nothing is there anymore, or 1 or 2 stories. If that landowner could convert those to housing rather than having a losing, empty shopping center, what better use of it? So those were creative things that are coming along. I think Bobby said earlier, we have creative people in this community. We really do. We have talented architects in this community, talented designers. If we all put our heads together, I think we can create the space and we can make room for a changing America. By the way, I'm really hot on this. One of the best things about belonging to AARP is they have this Livable Communities series, and they will send you all these wonderful, wonderful things free. So go on your AARP site and order some. I have stacks of them.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would just like to thank all of you.
We have another Zoom person that wants to talk.
We have another Zoom person.
We're not quite wrapped up yet. We got Gabriel Sanders on Zoom with your hand up. Why don't you go ahead, Gabriel, and unmute yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Brandon. Well, first of all, it's been really encouraging to hear everybody present being as hopeful about this and encouraging to each other about the creativity present in Carmel, because I know from experience from talking to a lot of you, from elected officials to residents, that that's the case. So I work for Monterey County Land Watch. We are an organization that advocates for the protection of natural resources, as well as the development of housing inside of our cities, city center development. And what you're all talking about is exactly that: density added to your city in the right places, determined by the people who live there. And it sounds like you all have some good ideas already. When it comes to parking, you can be flexible about that. When it comes to the size of the units, you can be flexible about that. I hear all the right ideas coming forth tonight, and Land Watch is here to offer whatever resources we can, whether it's policy research or helping to galvanize the support that you need among the people that are on our newsletter and subscription list. That's what we're here for, to help you solve this problem in the way that most reflects the needs and desires of your community. So I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I applaud you for your efforts so far. Land Watch is here to help. We're really happy to hear the talks of the climate change aspect of this, keeping cars off the road. For every unit that you build, you reduce commute, you reduce carbon in the air, and you reduce the chances that we go over the tipping point when it comes to the worst outcomes of climate change. So keep that in mind as you're doing this planning process. It's a great opportunity to contribute to a lot of different complex but interconnected policy issues. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I'd like to point out that Monterey Land Watch is a lobbyist for densifying cities, just so we know who they are.
If I might add, we are a 501c3 organization that does not lobby.
All right, thanks, Gabriel. We don't want to get into the old back and forth on that, but does anybody else in the room want to make a comment that didn't have a chance to speak tonight, or anybody on Zoom that didn't get a chance to speak yet? I know we've gone past 7 o'clock, but that was a very lively conversation, and I think it was well worth the extra 20 plus minutes. So look at the room, don't see anybody, look at the Zoom. So I'll look at you, ad hoc committee, if you're satisfied with tonight, or if you want to make any closing comments. I don't think we have any more from the public.
Well, my only closing comment would be thank you all for coming. Thank you all that did attend, that have left. It's really a collaborative, cooperative argumentation situation that we're going to be in, where we're talking about different things. I, for one, would not like. I hope that we don't change the makeup of our residents. I would like to do these changes within the downtown area. That would be my hope. And I think the only way that we're going to get there is by collaborative thinking and creative thinking. So thank you all for showing up. Thank you everybody out in the Zoom world. And please feel free to call me anytime. My phone number's out there. It's 831-917-5427. Call City Hall and get it if you need it. And give me a call, and I'm happy to talk with you about this in private and come up with some ideas and solutions. And if you're afraid to voice them, I'll voice them for you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Very, very nice.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Great presentation. Thank you, guys. You put a lot of work in.